Today we're going to take on the mighty task of comparing three of the latest wireless noise-cancelling headphones that have arrived in the store. The Sony WH-1000XM5, the Bowers & Wilkins Px7S2, and the Sennheiser Momentum 4. There's quite a few differences between these models, but right off the top, we can say that all three of these headphones are quite good. So which one you prefer is mostly going to come down to your preference in sound signature and some other practical considerations. So without further ado, let's go through the overall design of these headphones. I'll start with the crowd favorite, the Sony WH-1000XM5. The XM5 is the latest model in a series of headphones that has become supremely popular for Sony. The design of the WH-1000XM5 is a big departure from the previous models, with a much more anonymous, understated look. You may disagree, but personally I think it looks pretty nice. However, there is one disappointment with the new design that everyone seems to agree on. The new Sony XM5 no longer folds up like the previous generation XM4. Actually, none of the headphones in this roundup fold up like the XM4 either, so if this is a critical factor, you'll be happy to know that the Sony XM4 will still remain on the market alongside the XM5. Now, I found overall comfort to be good on the Sony because of the lightweight, but I do wish the new headband was just slightly thicker like the one on the XM4. Also, if you have big ears, you may find the ear cups quite shallow. We aren't really set up to scientifically test for noise cancelling performance here at Minidisc, but I will say the Sony seems to have the best combination of strong noise cancellation that still feels natural. Moving on to the new Bowers & Wilkins Px7S2, I think this model has seen the biggest improvement over its predecessor in terms of design. The Bowers & Wilkins Px7S2 still has a premium feel like the previous Px7, but it's now lighter and more comfortable. Personally, I think the Px7S2 is the only model out of these three headphones where the fit and finish of the unit matches the price, though the premium build is noticeably heavier. Compared to the previous Px7, I find the Px7S2 is easily more comfortable, and in particular it has a better conforming headband. The earpads are a little bit stiffer than the competition, so you will notice a higher clamping force and weight on the B&W compared to the Sony and Sennheiser. But if you have ears that stick out a lot, the Px7S2 is a great choice because of the steeply angled drivers that are set deep in the cup. The noise cancellation seems to be pretty decent on the Px7S2, but I find it creates a noticeable sensation of pressure that isn't as comfortable or natural as the Sony or the Sennheiser's noise cancelling. The new Sennheiser Momentum 4 is the newest of these three models, and this headphone's design is also a noticeable departure from the previous generations of Momentum. The design is now much more plain and anonymous, and while the fabric texture on the headband is a classy touch, the bare plastic of the ear cups is a bit uninspiring. Maybe the point was to make a headphone that wouldn't call attention to itself on a Zoom call. All that said, this new design is lightweight and comfortable, with roomy ear cups and broad headband padding. The Sennheiser has the biggest ear cups out of these three models, and we think that most people will find this model to be the most comfortable choice. Noise cancelling performance is quite good and feels quite natural. You can actually control the level of noise cancellation by pinching the touch panel of this headphone, which is a unique touch. Let's talk about battery life. One key advantage of the Momentum 4 over the other two headphones in this roundup is battery life. The Sennheiser claims the longest battery runtime by far, offering up to 60 hours of playback, which is twice as long as what Sony and Bowers advertise. If you want to go for the longest time between charges, the Sennheiser is a standout choice. On the other hand, the Bowers & Wilkins Px7S2 will simply not produce sound at all if it is not charged, even when you use the included cable. So if you are often away from a charger for longer than 30 hours, the Px7S2 is not a great choice. Connectivity-wise, all three units support Bluetooth 5.2 and multi-point Bluetooth, allowing you to connect to multiple devices at the same time, so that for instance, you can be connected to your laptop but hear incoming calls from your phone. As far as codec support goes, the Sony supports AAC, SBC, and LDAC codecs, while the Sennheiser and Bowers & Wilkins support AAC, aptX, and the new aptX adaptive codec. Bowers & Wilkins additionally supports aptX HD. One thing we should note is that while all three of these headphones support a wired connection, only the Sennheiser and Bowers & Wilkins support a USB-C digital connection, which lets you use the internal DAC of the headphone. So if you want the highest quality wired listening experience, it's worth keeping this in mind. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the sound of these headphones, starting with the Sony WH-1000XM5. The new Sony features a revised 40mm driver compared to the 50mm driver on the WH-1000XM4. I think the new driver delivers a clearer sound with less mid-bass thickness and tighter bass response. Overall, the new model sounds more balanced, and I think vocals in particular come through cleaner with more texture. While this headphone doesn't quite have the same peakier upper mid-range response of other Japanese headphone brands like Audio-Technica and Fostex, it actually gets a little closer to that signature than previous Sony headphones in this series. Now I know that not everyone is going to love this brighter signature, as the thicker, more forgiving sound of the WH-1000XM4 was really fun for aggressive electronic and pop music. I prefer the new tuning, and honestly, I still think bass on the Sony is a touch lumpy and thumpy for critical listening. Overall, I think the Sony excels with genres with more synthetic instruments like modern studio pop, electronic, and hip-hop. On recordings with more real-world acoustics like classical or jazz recordings, the timbre of the sound is a little bit artificial to my ears. Moving on to the Bowers & Wilkins, I should say first that I was not a big fan of the previous Bowers & Wilkins Px7. Even though that headphone had an excellent soundstage, the tuning had a very sculpted mid-range signature that made things sound wonky and congested to me. I'm happy to report that with the new Px7 S2, things are much improved. The Px7 S2 preserves the impressive soundstage of the original model, and it refines the tuning so that while things still have a distinctive coloration, it's done in a tasteful way. The core of the Px7 S2 sound is a thick, chesty mid-bass, a slight dip in the upper mid-range vocals, coupled with a little peak in the highs for detail. This model seems deliberately tuned so that you get most of the meat of the bass and the highs, and a sense of richness without being fatiguing even on really aggressive recordings. I don't think this is the headphone to choose if you prefer a neutral, flat response, because the combination of thick mid-bass and rolled-off sub-bass still makes this headphone sound somewhat congested. But it is a very forgiving signature for most genres with a charm of its own. Now we come to the Sennheiser Momentum 4, and I can plainly say that this is my overall favorite out of the three in terms of sound. The Sennheiser is interesting in that it sounds flat and natural from the highs all the way down to the mid-range, and then it adds a really noticeable bass boost in the lows. Sennheiser has managed to sculpt this bass boost so that it sounds fast and punchy rather than thick and lumpy like it can sound on the Sony or Bowers & Wilkins, but it still adds an obvious kick to most recordings. The rest of the frequencies just sound natural and accurate to me. The Momentum 4 has more forward high frequencies than the Bowers & Wilkins, but at the same time it sounds a little less emphasized in upper mid-range vocals than the Sony. Sennheiser has emphasized the higher treble ranges, which brings out that typically dry Sennheiser sound. As a result, the Sennheiser can sound a little bit unforgiving and edgy with a bad recording, but most of the time, it maintains a good balance between fun and detailed. I think the Sennheiser has the most natural and refined sound in this roundup, while still giving you a bass response to smile about. So, there's obviously a lot of factors to consider when choosing between these three headphones, and we haven't even covered all of them in this video. But truthfully, we have reached a point where this product category is quite mature, and I don't think there are any obvious flaws with any of these models. I would say, pick the Sony if noise cancelling performance is critical. Pick the Bowers & Wilkins if you want something beautifully built with a forgiving sound, or if your ears stick out a lot. Meanwhile, I think the Sennheiser is a great overall choice with great sound and great battery life. But if all of these sound like pretty good options to you, you may as well just pick the one you like the look of, since I don't think you can go too wrong here. Let us know what you think. Drop in and have a listen, or you can order online at minidisc.com.au. This is Lachlan for Minidisc TV, and we'll catch you next time.